The Lingxi caves were very labyrinth-like. After traveling down 1,000 twists and turns, Shen Qingqiu emerged in what seemed like a different world, strange and beautiful. Here, there were neither wind nor moon, yet it was cool and quiet. Together, white stones like clouds and green stones like jade created wonders large and small, as well as natural stone beds. At the center lay a pool of clear water that reflected this other world like a mirror. The only thing that marred the beauty was that some cultivator who'd previously gone into seclusion here hadn't properly cherished this public facility. The cave walls were covered in countless gashes and gouges made by both blade and sword glares. The stone walls were further plastered with swathes of dried blood, and the stains had already blackened. This was only one cavern of many, and though it looked a tad like a murder scene, Shen Qingqiu was very satisfied and had no plans to find another location. He sat on the stone bed and began to cultivate, carefully following the methods he had memorized from manuals. Then, as if the heavens didn't want him to try to honestly farm points, not long after he began cultivating, he heard a strange sound. Panting. The panting of a person in pain. At the same time, he sensed a burst of nigh rampant spiritual energy. All right, he knew what had happened. The Lingxi caves were gigantic. Of course Shen Qingqiu couldn't be the only person who'd asked permission to enter seclusion. Someone else was cultivating here as well, and they had entered a qi deviation, which was currently at a critical juncture. I only wanted to cultivate in seclusion and farm, marshal, skill, points. That's all. Can you not do this? Can you not? Shen Qingqiu's eyes snapped open as he decided to investigate. He followed the sound and the waves of spiritual energy as he navigated the various twists and turns. As he went, the disturbances became larger and larger. At last, he arrived in another cavern. As soon as he entered, he saw a figure clothed in white facing away from him, their long swords stabbed into a rock, all the way down to the hilt. Sword glares flew in every direction, without order or pattern. The smears of blood on the person in white said, victim, but their movements said, crazed murderer. This person's qi deviation was pretty horrifying. Shen Qingqiu mulled it over. With his half-assed knowledge, if he tried to smooth this person's spiritual circulation, it was hard to say whether he would be more likely to help or accidentally stab another spiritual knife into the fellow's back. It was then that he caught a sight of the sword. With its master's spiritual energy out of control, the sword trembled unceasingly, pulling itself free a slither at a time, all while emitting an ear-piercing shriek. Silver light ran down the hilt's engraved incantations and phoenix ornamentation in an unending stream. Shen Qingqiu needed only a single glance to recognize which sword it was, whose sword it was. Fuck. Of all people, he had to meet that guy. Before he wanted to help, but now all he wanted was to flee for his life. It was too late. The person in white swung his head around, having already detected his presence. In any other state, Shen Qingqiu might have declared, "What a beautiful man!" But a man could be as beautiful as he wanted, and if he glared at you with crimson eyes and bulging veins, you'd scramble to kneel, okay? Shen Qingqiu fled with a flick of his sleeves, but the man slapped the stone wall and sent rubble flying. The long sword finally broke free of the rock, and it shot through the air to stop before Shen Qingqiu's eyes, blocking his path. He barely managed to break in time. Had he been running even a little faster, he would have been beheaded. In the next instant, the white-clad man rushed him, his eyes devoid of reason. Shen Qingqiu knew it was too late for him to run, and he could only steel himself to meet this fight head-on. He drew his right hand, putting everything into this one blow. He struck the man's chest. If this person really was a man the rumor painted him to be, with enough martial prowess to take on the protagonist's OP abilities, this hit would be damn near useless. Not only damn near useless, Shen Qingqiu might be the one flying 10 meters back while coughing up fresh blood or something. However, it wasn't useless, and the one sent flying a meter back while coughing up blood wasn't Shen Qingqiu, but the other guy. Shen Qingqiu raised his right hand while staring at the person he'd knocked flat. To think he was already this badass even without making the effort to fake it! Ha! In truth, while those who entered Qi deviations were terrifying when berserk, they were also terribly fragile. With luck, a single strike could be the last straw that broke their back. Expression conflicted, Shen Qingqiu watched the man half kneel in pain, straining to rise and rip into his foe, only to collapse back onto one knee. At last, Shen Qingqiu sighed and moved over, placing a hand on the man's back. Let me say this first. Shen Qingqiu didn't concern himself with whether the man could understand him. He was saying it for himself. If I don't help you now, it'll be too late. I'm not familiar with how it works, though, so if anyhow, I've tried my best, so don't blame me. After who knew how long, Shen Qingqiu felt the man's spiritual circulation gradually even out and return to normal. His worry slowly eased, and he withdrew his palm. All that remained was to pray that his slapdash, desperate attempt to help hadn't impaired the man's cultivation. The man he'd miraculously managed to save remained with his head lowered, still not yet fully conscious. To be honest, Shen Qingqiu had already guessed this person's identity, but the system's notification provided absolute confirmation. Congratulations! System notification. The scenario, Liu Qingge's death, has been changed. The villain, Shen Qingqiu's grave digging and hatefulness ratings have been decreased. Plus 200 points. Yep, called it. This was his apprentice brother from the same sect. He was also a sucker who had been done in by the original Shen Qingqiu. It was the master of Bai Zhan Peaks of Changqiong Mountain's 12 peaks, Liu Qingge. He was a character who personified badassery. The 12 peaks of Changqiong Mountain each had their own long histories and distinctive characteristics. For example, the head Qiongding Peak coordinated the big picture and oversaw the entire group. Shen Qingqiu's Qingjing Peak was a favorite spot of scholars and young artists. Wangjian Peak, with a perfect environment, had produced legions of master swordsmen since time immemorial. Kuxing Peak's name, ascetic practice, spoke for itself. Even if you whipped Shen Qingqiu, he still wouldn't want to go. And Xianshu Peak, meanwhile, was a Dru-worthy heaven. That was because this last peak only accepted female disciples, and historically their disciples were highly attractive. It was therefore filled to the brim with beautiful girls. There had been no shortage of lewd fan works written by perverted readers, blossoming en masse like flowers. Of these, a tyrannical Xianshu fell in love with me, and my days sleeping around on Xianshu Peak had been particularly outstanding, filled with grade school level writing and erotic scenes with no bottom line. The circulation and impact of these fanfics had been enormous, to the point that their popularity compared to that of the original work. But out of all these peaks, the one youths loved the most, revered the most, and were the wildest about joining was definitely Liu Qingge's Bai Zhan Peak. It was the most warlike of the Changqiong Mountains branches, as well as the branch with the greatest martial ability. Every single generation's Bai Zhan Peak Lord was a world-class swordmaster, a victor of countless battles, an undefeated legend. How hot-blooded, how dashing. Male readers always fervently admired strong characters. Even though Liu Qingge never officially debuted on page, he hadn't lacked for fans, and Shen Yuan had been especially fascinated with him. In his headcanon, Liu Qingge had been a sharp and manly man, powerful and magnificent. A war god, right? Shen Qingqiu looked down at that face, as beautiful as a fine woman's, and his dreams shattered and died. The fantasies he'd always held, destroyed. How could the invincible Bai Zhan Peak Lord look like his spiritual antithesis? This was clearly the face of a charming young master who arranged flowers and plucked farewell willow branches. Oh my god, with this appearance, you've totally betrayed the headcanons of your martial prowess fanatics. Then again, it made sense. Liu Qingge was the older brother of the #1 true female lead, the peerless beauty Liu Mingyan. As the protagonist's wife, she absolutely had to be first class from top to bottom. It was just science for her to have such powerful genes. Undefeatable in battle, an arrogant disposition, and an attractive face. With Bingge around, a second character in the same mold was unnecessary. No wonder Great Master Aeroplane had offed him so early. Huh, as any other side characters, of course you'd be either exceptional cannon fodder or dead in seconds. It hadn't occurred to Shen Qingqiu in the moment, but as he thought about it now, how might saving this person impact Luo Binghe's satisfaction points? There were a few details on Liu Qingge, but he played a very important role in highlighting the depths of Shen Qingqiu's general scumminess. Even though Liu Shen pair were sect siblings, they didn't get along. This was why Shen Qingqiu had tried to flee at first. Already unable to see eye to eye on a normal day, throwing Liu Qingge into a qi deviation was just asking him to either chase down and hack Shen Qingqiu to death, or like in the original work, to have Shen Qingqiu sabotage and kill him instead. Though no one knew why their hatred ran so deep, it was a sure fact that the original Shen Qingqiu had been Liu Qingge's murderer. The exposure of this incident was one of the incidents that marked the start of Shen Qingqiu's downfall. The specific line they used to condemn Shen Qingqiu went something like, taking advantage of an opening during another cultivation, he intervened, driving the man to his death. So this very moment was likely when he made his move. The original Shen Qingqiu killed the female lead's only family, so of course Luo Binghe took revenge for his wife. Shen Qingqiu's hatefulness quotient was truly extraordinary. While Shen Qingqiu was crouching there worrying about his future, Liu Qingge had finished coughing up blood and finally regained consciousness. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw Shen Qingqiu sitting before him with a bored expression, looking down his stuck-up nose at him. He definitely didn't look like someone with good intentions. Alarmed, Liu Qingge violently jerked upright, ready to defend himself. The motion jarred his badly injured internal organs, throwing his qi circulation into chaos. Another mouthful of blood sprayed out of him. Shidi, regulate your qi. Don't be so agitated, Shen Qingqiu said coolly. You're the Bai Zhan Peak Lord. How could you let yourself look so wretched? Here, wipe yourself off. He passed Liu Qingge a handkerchief. Liu Qingge coughed up more blood. Shen, what the hell are you planning now? Seeing how much he was suffering, Shen Qingqiu lightly clapped him on the back. Of course, Liu Qingge instantly assumed that Shen Qingqiu intended him harm, but he was helpless to avoid the touch. Only after the palm connected did he feel a clear, steady stream of spiritual energy enter and flow through his body, smoothing his circulation. Liu Qingge was more aghast than he would have been if Shen Qingqiu had stabbed him in the back. After all, he was used to all the backstabbing. Shen Qingqiu continued to pat his back. Liu Shidi, to tell you the truth, lately Shi Xiong has been in seclusion, and he's come to realize many things, he said earnestly. Seeing you at death's door, a beauty fading, dying so young, it brought back many memories. Shi Xiong is deeply ashamed and filled with regret. Liu Qingge began to hack up blood even more profusely. Shen Qingqiu said, How about this? Leave past events in the past. From now on, let's join hands in respect and be a pair of model sect brothers. What do you think, Shidi? Laying his objective out straight was a little shameful, but since he hadn't killed Liu Qingge, it had thereby changed the scene and avoided its evil karma. He figured why not go all the way and simply build a good relationship? Maybe Master Liu could even back him up in the future. Liu Qingge's complexion was abnormally poor. He looked Shen Qingqiu in the eyes for a while. Then, as if he'd finally reached the limits of his tolerance, he said, "Ew, go away." Shen Qingqiu nodded in understanding. After all, they've hated each other for so long. You couldn't farm favor points so soon after a heel turn. He couldn't rush this kind of thing, so just take it slow. He went as asked, waving behind him, without looking back as he walked away. If Shidi runs into more trouble during training, there's no need to be shy. You can just call your Shixiong for help. Since we're so close, we should take care of each other. Liu Qingge looked like he would cough up more blood if Shen Qingqiu said anything further. His glare was terrifying. Shen Qingqiu wisely shut his mouth and did as he was told. Liu Qingge was left alone, and he painfully hacked up another mouthful of blood. They'd always been at odds ever since he was young. Liu Qingge had been unable to stand Shen Qingqiu. Both parties had deeply despised each other. It wasn't the type of vitriol you'd see when a belligerent but happy couple fought and argued, but the type where one wrong word could escalate into violence, even to the point of trying to kill each other. The fact that Shen Qingqiu hadn't kicked Liu Qingge while he was down was inconceivable in itself. But to go so far as to help, even save him? But the reality was right before him. Liu Qingge's face couldn't help twisting. He was unable to remember what had happened after the moment he'd lost control. But now his spiritual circulation was smooth. He couldn't have straightened it himself during this frenzy. He must have had outside assistance. Could Shen Qingqiu really have helped him? Just thinking about this possibility filled Liu Qingge with revulsion. He would rather have died.